This time next year, you could have a globally ranked podcast. A podcast that positions you as the industry expert and authority you are. A podcast that impacts your client retention and helps you build a robust network. A podcast that brings in additional streams of revenue, secures you speaking opportunities, and can even help you pitch your next book to a major publisher. Want to start a podcast to help your business dreams and goals come true? Join us for Podcast Launch Prep Week. From February 23rd to 27th, we are bringing you 5 days of virtual hands-on workshops, panel Q&As, and even hot seat coaching so you can plan your podcast strategy, make a launch plan, and even plan out your first 6 months of episodes to keep you off that content treadmill. If a podcast is on your to-do list for 2026, join us today at podfoxmedia.com. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm here for a very special 2-part episode. So this week we're doing part 1. Next week we'll be doing part 2. I'm here with a mastermind of Ati Grinspan, who you've heard on the podcast before. And she runs Bu Brand Live, which I've spoken at the past 2 years. So I've talked about that on this podcast a lot. You guys have heard this. If you've been listening, thank you. And she has something called the Ascension Mastermind. And she brings together thought leaders who are contributing to an anthology book. I mean, that's just like a small part of the mastermind. It's a whole year-long thing. But a big part of it is amplifying your story. So in the spirit of the mastermind, we're doing 2 conversations with like half the mastermind and then the other half. And we're going to dig into the big, brave question related to all of this. But before I do, let me introduce you to the voices you're going to hear on today's call. So if you're new here, I'm Sarah. I'm the host of the podcast, and I'm also a podcast producer and strategic consultant.
Hi, my name is Emily Rose. I'm an erotic embodiment coach, and I also own a movement studio in North New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Elena. I am a chef and coach. I own Well Rooted Kitchen, where we teach neurodiverse individuals confidence and independent skills through cooking, and launching Well Rooted You, which is helping women have the freedom to just be and explore and follow their wild ideas.
Hello, my name is Julie Tran. I'm a marriage coach. I help women entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers release resentment and transform it into gooey love.
Oh, gooey. Okay, I love this. So as you can see, we have like a good cross section here. We do really different shit. But one thing that's so funny about entrepreneurship and like the small business journey is the things that kind of end up being themes no matter what you do. And I think a big part of that is your story. And one of the things we talked about earlier today in this retreat is how your mission has kind of always been your mission. However it looks, however it shows up might look different, but your mission has probably been your mission since you were like a kid even. Related to all of that is your story, which that's what Ascension is so largely about, is amplifying your story. So I'm curious, I want to open the floor. Whoever wants to take it can take it. Big break question of the day. How does your story matter when it comes to running a business? How's that related?
So actually, when you were saying how your mission is probably your mission when you were born or when you were younger, it was not my mission. Like my mission as an immigrant child living in Garden Grove, California, in a one bedroom of our house, as a child of an immigrant family of 8 with not that much money growing up, I thought that I was going to grow up to be a successful businesswoman and have the financial freedom to have food on the table, to go to nice restaurants, to buy nice clothes and never worry about the bills and my mortgage. I also had aspirations of being so rich one day that I'm going to hire somebody to put lotion on my body. Right? And And so that was my dream. That was the American dream to me. But I became a marriage coach because that American dream came at a cost. It came at a cost of love. And this whole story mining process, this whole journey of excavating these stories on why is it that I do what I do, it was so important for me personally because as a coach and business owner, I know what I do, but then sometimes I forget the story. So sometimes it can feel like I'm selling, which I'm totally good with, but there's just like this depth that is missing that I've been craving. And this process of excavating my stories and remembering, and even though wasn't what I wanted to do, I had no idea I was going to be a relationship coach. If you went back in time and told me that, I would be like, what world are we in right now? Okay, that is not the definition of success back then for me. But it helped me remember that was actually an important part of my journey too, because I had to redefine what success was. It didn't include love in this way that I know now, because my definition of love back then was incomplete. It caused me and my husband to be on the brink of divorce. And I had to reevaluate, what is success? How does love play into it? And I realized that love is the most important piece of this. And me reconnecting to my story, it just made everything make sense. And I'm excited to be able to serve from this deeper knowing in my heart and in my soul that is so much more accessible to me now than it was before.
I have so many thoughts and questions about all of this, but I do want to hear what you all think too.
Well, listening to you speak, so many things came up for me because I too am an immigrant. My family moved here when I was 6 from Italy. And one of the stories that was coming up for me was the culture, the two sides of culture that came across the ocean when we moved. The sort of more romanticized side of the culture of this dolce far niente, like enjoy the sweetness of doing nothing, in contrast with this non fare una brutta figura, which means like don't make a bad impression or don't make yourself look bad. And it ties into growing up. My parents were like, you need to do well in school. You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO. And that is success. And that is what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a doctor. And I was in pre-med, then switched to psychology. And then halfway through the psych therapy journey, I decided to go to culinary school because I'm like, who am I living this life for? Like this isn't what I want to do. I mean, it kind of is, but not really. And I don't want to wait till I'm retired to actually pursue my dreams. I kept thinking I'll be a doctor, I'll be rich, and then I'll open a restaurant, or then I'll pursue my dreams. I'm going to do this later. Because I wasn't allowed really to dream. And as a little girl, I was super creative, like this wild, free spirit. And then slowly life sort of like chipped away at that until I was like, F this, like, who am I living for? And like, this is no one else's life but mine. And that's like the first sort of pivot to starting on that path of really building a life that I want and defining success on my own terms. And I don't have to justify that to anyone. And then I had my first kid, and that was another like, wait a minute, like redefining my identity and completely losing myself while trying to grow a business, thinking like, how am I going to do this? Like, I think I need to quit and get a job. Like, it's a 4-letter word. Like, instead of owning a business, I just need to go work for someone else because this is too much and I can't handle it. And so that thought of, I need to go do something for someone else because my idea is not enough. I'm not enough. And then I really started working inwards on, well, who am I? What do I want? Working on like mind body skills, kind of going back to some of the therapy that I was helping other people reach their goals and dreams and holding space for them and allowing them to be free to explore and encouraging them. But I wasn't giving myself that same space, that same service. That's what helped me birth this iteration of Well-Rooted You of let's explore what you want. Who are you? Without any judgment. You're just free to be. and create events and spaces and coach alongside women to just help them explore without any judgment, just to be who they are. And what does that mean, and how they can have strong roots and foundations so then they can just grow and do what they want and weather any storm that life kind of throws at them, because they have a strong core and just knowing who they are.
So I just want to also acknowledge the two of you, listening to each of you share and speak. I spent the last weekend with you, and even hearing, I know parts of what you've shared this weekend, but hearing it in this format feels just so, like, I'm just honored to have had this experience with you and the other women and being here in this moment right now. And I was sharing with you before, like, speaking actually used to be something that really stressed me out. And it's not a story that I included in the story that showed up for me this weekend, but it still sneaks through every now and then. When I was a kid, I had challenges with my speech, and as an adult, it's kind of shown up in my throat and my throat chakra and expression. And each of what you just said too is like, as a kid, I was such a highly sensitive, tiny human. I was feeling things that people couldn't even see in terms of emotions. And I grew up in a really challenging, messy divorce. And part of this weekend, I've got all this baggage from childhood. So as we were going through the story mining, I'm like, oh, fuck, this is all the shit that's going to show up. And how am I going to write this in a way that is coming from a place of growth and healing? And how do I make sure to not like hurt anyone, even though that there's so much hurt there for me? And the story that actually came through is so obvious now as I look at it, because there was my life before this moment and my life after this moment. And I share the story of my best friend, Kayla, and how she was tragically taken from us in an instant. And my life before her passing was autopilot and people pleasing and overachieving and numb and go and push. And how many jobs can I have to make sure that I stay afloat? And there's money stories laced in there too. And then there's my life after she passed, asking me in the thick of grief, how do I move from this? How do I move through this? And in that grief, in that numbness, I made horrible choices for myself. I dated all the wrong people, treated my body like shit. I did anything I could to not feel. And when I found movement, not hard athletics that I'd been so used to throwing myself at, treating my body like a machine, when I found dance and sensual movement and it turned into embodiment for me, I started to feel again. And in that feeling, there was so much healing. And that has led me to the studio that I own now. And it has led me to where I'm at, guiding leaders and people who take risks with their life in entrepreneurship back home to their bodies. Because we so often just like channel all of our energy into productivity and what can we be for other people and how can we help, and we abandon so many parts of ourselves. And that theme from childhood through money stories and love and volatile arguments and then loss has kind of come up through a thread of then we sometimes do that in business too. And we can have all this success and all these goals and all these accolades and money and beautiful things. But what happens when we can't feel anything? Mm-hmm. And then what happens when we do, and how much freedom and liberation and play and pleasure is there for us when we're leading from our whole entire bodies?
First of all, just like you said, I want to honor everybody's story because I think already we've shared some really, emotional, like deep meaning to what we're even doing here. And I think what's interesting about this is everybody has that, who's moving through the world, but especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I'm so curious, like, to really dig into how those stories that we all carry impact not just the overall sense of identity, but also the decisions that we make in our business. And I want to like dig into some of my own here to show you kind of what I mean. All three of you already spoke about a little bit of like little you, your previous self. And I think that the inner child stuff and the childhood stories, the stories we've been carrying since childhood show up so much. We talked about this too earlier today, especially around somebody else who's here who will be on part 2 next week, was saying something about herself. And another person here reflected back like, hey, that's not true. That's not the you I've seen this weekend. And I said, hey, that sounds like, well, it sounds like a story you've been carrying since childhood. Somebody told you, right? Somebody told you that about yourself, and probably several times. And now you're carrying that story. And so it's funny because 2 things. Number one, I have a story that I talk too much, right? Definitely was on like every report card, every like, great, joy to have in class. She talks too much. Like she is a little chatty. Had to move her seat because she can't stop talking, but doesn't matter who you seat me next to. I'm going to talk to him. And then here I have made a career around talking, and not just around talking. I say that sort of tongue in cheek, right? I always make the joke that the person who's least surprised that I started a business around talking is my mom, but also it's about amplifying other people's voices. It's not just about me talking. It's about all of us talking, right? And you mentioned your throat chakra, and I shared that I've had a client who has said that to me in the past, that podcasting really helped open her throat chakra. Now, if you know me, if you've been listening to Big Brave Business, this is like not my kind of shit, but I can appreciate it. And I get the point. And I think like, okay, first I'm going to real quick share a different childhood story that I really carry, which is that I don't finish what I start. And this is a thing that I have like always been a big idea person, and something my parents have loved to tell me my whole life, and they still love to tell me, is that, yeah, you've got big ideas, but you love to start stuff. You really have trouble finishing. And it's amazing how much you like internalize that story about yourself. But you guys, I have 3 fucking degrees. I finished all of that. Okay. So like if I need evidence of being a finisher, that's like my go-to. Of course I can finish. If I don't finish something, this is what I know to be true, right? But this is taken like doing the work. What I know to be true is that if I don't finish something, it's because there was an intentional choice that it doesn't serve my goal anymore. And I choose not to continue with that. It's still a good idea, but that not all my ideas need to be finished. And that's okay. And that actually makes me a kick-ass CEO. So like, that's all right. But that is something that I struggled with. Anyways, so I want to come back to the amplifying voices, because this is where I was coming from with like, you may not even necessarily originally be aware of it, but what was your mission? You could kind of look back and see the threads of your life and kind of always see how it was your mission. Is that when I started my business, when I went into business for myself, I was so resistant to starting a podcast business. Actually, I was told for years before I did it, you should do this on the side. In fact, like my old boss told me, you should do this on the side. And I said, do you know how many fucking hours I work for you? I'm not doing anything on the side. And he said, well, I'll show you, and eliminated my job. So, okay, I guess I'll start a podcast business. I'm just kidding. But even when I started my business, I was just so resistant. Like I just kept thinking I was not put on this earth to do podcasting. That was just not my like soul work. And so, yeah, okay, fine. I'll like do podcasting for now because I need to make money. People need the help. Like, I'm good at it. Okay. Even there's a part of me that like really enjoys it. I can find the good about it, but this is just what I'm doing until, you said this too, until I can actually pursue my own dreams. But what actually helped my business scale is incorporating what does matter to me. It's not about the podcast. That's not why people come to me. That's not the results that I help people get. Like anybody can help you start a podcast. What I help people do has to do with that core mission, which comes back to amplifying voices, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look back, I was always that kid, right? And that has always been important to me, is like lifting up others, especially disenfranchised. I was like the kid who whoever was on the playground and didn't have anybody to play with, I like grabbed them and was like, you can play with me, like we're friends now, right? Like that was me always. I collected like people who I could support and I could lift up. Unfortunately, this didn't necessarily lead to great, healthy relationships, but so there's been a learning curve there too. But this is all linked to the work that I do now. So I'm curious, like, as I share my own experiences, what's coming up for you of ways that you see, oh, I can, like, I'm really particularly curious, Julie, about, you had this vision of success. And by the way, me too. Like, this is so embarrassing, but I dreamed of being a rich office lady as a small child. And I dreamed of heels clacking. You guys, I like have a single pair of heels and I thought about wearing them today. And I was like, I just cannot be bothered. Oh, but I had this vision of like heels clacking under fucking fluorescent lights. I knew from the time I was a child, this is going to be my boss bitch haircut. Like, I had a haircut in my head. I could picture my future self of like, this is what my haircut's going to look like when I'm a rich business lady. So I so get that, but I'm so curious because what I suspect to be true is that what you actually were pursuing in that vision for yourself as a kid, that definition of success, etc., probably is rooted to some degree in the validation of you, which probably also showed up in your marriage and probably shows up in a lot of other people's marriages, and helping them be validated and identifying their own idea of success actually is a huge part of what you do. That's my guess. I actually don't know much about your marriage coaching, but that's what I suspect.
I love hearing your reflection on that, and like the way that you using your own words, and just hearing just like 2 minutes of my introduction. That's really cool, because I don't use the same words, especially over this weekend when I've been able to understand my story a little bit more. But it is definitely overlapping for sure, and like the essence of that is there. I have a similar story. It's not with the clacking heels, but it was more about like this image of me working on Wall Street in a cubicle right after I graduated from college, wearing like this pinstripe suit and working so hard that like I'm sleeping at the desk, and like the secretary has to do my laundry, my dry cleaning, right? And like that was cool to me. Like, can you believe it? Like that was cool to me. Like that was and I think even back then that was the culture. Like, your value is in how smart you are, how hard you can work, and that's your power. And also like as a woman in a pretty package, right? So there's that. But I think what I was pursuing at the time, yes, is validation, but also what's beneath the validation was love, right? Because I talked and I was thinking about my introduction. I was like, oh, you know what? I feel like I was missing. There's more that I wanted to share. And I shared about like what success looked like. But really what I was trying to not experience growing up is the struggle that I watched my parents live through for decades and decades. I'm one of 6 kids. My oldest brother has an intellectual and physical disability. I think I mentioned this, that they fled Vietnam and almost died multiple times getting here, and witnessed them working back-breaking jobs 7 days a week, never, ever taking a vacation, not even having a concept of vacation. Who takes a vacation? Who has, like, that's not even like a vocabulary word for them. And I just remember like growing up, I would ask my mom, we would go to the grocery store and I was like, hey, can we get these cookies? And she's like, it's not on sale. We can't get that. It's not on sale. And I remember going to my friend's house and she asked me if I was hungry. And I was like, yeah. And she gives me a bite of her sandwich. I'm like, what is this? This is so good. And I look at it and it's Wonder Bread with ham and mayo and Wonder Bread. And it just like melted in my mouth. I never had that before, because that's full price white bread at the grocery store. We never bought that, right? So really for me, it represented safety and freedom and the ability to not struggle, so that I have the capacity to just be free. And I think beneath all of that is love, right? All of that is love, like love for yourself, love for others, just love is a self-expression. I would not have thought of these words back then, but as I reflect on it now, that's what we all really want at the end of the day. And I thought I needed all those things in order to have that, in order to be good enough to have a life that had love like that. So I think that even though I would never have thought I would be anywhere even close to like the planet of being a relationship coach, it makes a lot of sense that I had to go through all of that to untangle what I really wanted, what success really was for me, and unlearning the working your ass off to prove how good you are, and also taking off that pressure of being productive, of having all the right answers, of being a certain type of person that I put on my husband when he wasn't showing up the way that I expected him to, because I expected him to show up the way that I was showing up. Well, not surprisingly, the woman I serve today is the woman that I once was, because they are having the same struggles, except it's one step further because they've been doing the work and their husbands don't get it. They are not necessarily like supportive of them, like going down this spiritual path and wanting to heal themselves so that like they can show up better. Their husbands, there's just a disconnect. And so they don't feel supported physically, emotionally, spiritually. And that leads to like so much loneliness and turmoil inside the home. And then when you add kids into the equation, the environment can just feel sometimes very toxic.
So when you were sharing about those stories, I'm definitely not a stranger to inner work. I'm a little more comfortable holding space for that to be done than digging around with things that I, let's just say, thought I had put to rest. And it's not that we need to always like go back into things that we have made resolutions with or peace with, or enter the word that suits you. But what was so amazing about this experience is to go back through things that used to be so wildly painful. And maybe there was still a twinge of shame or smallness or shrinking around it, and literally rewrite it from a place of love and honor. And what's showing up for me now is the story that I wrote in the chapter about being so sensitive. As a kid, I mentioned it before, I didn't know what being like highly sensitive or empathic or just like hyper aware, I did not know what that was until my first boyfriend's mom handed me a book, and it was literally called The Highly Sensitive Person. Mm-hmm. Up until that point, I thought something was just wrong with me. And I think we either hear the thing about talking too much, we hear things in a way that's not of honor or curiosity or love or interest. And so we identify or we like anchor it into our bodies as something that's bad or wrong or fucked up or whatever. So I just remember distinctly, like, Emily's always crying. She's so sensitive. And that's what shitty little kids would say about you or whatever. Not shitty little kids, not to say that, but kids can be honest, or they see a perspective and they're not going to sugarcoat that shit. So anyway, I remember that from being young. And at that time, there was so much volatile communication, emotional weaponizing, honestly, and chaos in my life from the time I was like 3 or 4, that I thought the awareness, the sensitivity, all the things that I felt were were bad, that there was something wrong with me. And fast forward to all the work that I do now and understanding humanness and emotion and the things that we carry and what lives in our bodies before we even tell our stories is really a superpower of mine now. And it took a long time to appreciate that. And then throughout that period of grief in my life, which was almost a decade ago, and it never goes away, these things that imprint on our life, they never go away. But during that pain period of my life, I was so numb. I had completely lost any sight of that magic within me, because even though that sensitivity, that you're so sensitive, was used against me, I was such a wild child. I would run around half naked and make onion grass potions in my mom's backyard, and like through this chaotic, rough time that was going on around me, I always had creativity and whimsy and just like this wild free spirit. And so many things happen to us, I think, along the way as we grow up, that it gets stolen from us, taken, we shove it down, we don't make space for it anymore. And I see that so in so many places too, like especially as entrepreneurs, like we don't leave room for pleasure or play, or the creativity is usually funneled into what we're building or how we're making money. So yeah, that sensitivity is something that I cherish now. And when someone says it to me, it feels like it's who I am. It's not something I feel like I have to hide anymore. And part of my mission is to help women remember that those innate parts of us, intuition and sensuality and curiosity, we have to remember those because they're so vital. It's like what makes us who we are. And it's really easy to forget that shit. In fact, it's really easy to make sure you're just booked out and overscheduled, and to avoid the challenge or maybe even the work required to find that again. And I happen to do that through movement and sensual practices and eroticism and dance and witchy shit. There's so many pathways back into the body. This is the one that I found for me at a time that was really dark and desperate, and I was really just not taking care of myself. And it has completely changed the course of my life, and the way that I get to share it with people and women, it changes the course of their life too. And now I'm on a mission too. So I've done it in the sacred space of the studio, in the four walls of this tiny corner of Northwest New Jersey. And I'm really passionate about bringing that type of energy into the entrepreneurial space, because the women that I spend time with are incredible. We are constantly giving 110 to the things that we're building. And it's so easy to forget to eat, to pee when you gotta pee, to forget the last time you had an orgasm. Like, we forget that we have needs and desires, and that what we're doing can be pleasurable and enjoyable. And we got to celebrate that shit too.
When you talked about like the playground and bringing and being friends with anyone, that was totally me. Even someone here in the group was mentioning how they had struggled to feel like they belonged. And she said, I think if you were at my school, like you totally would have been someone that would have felt safe and would have invited me to play. And I said, yeah, I have so many stories of being that person. To this day, one of my best friends, we used to joke that we were the popular girls, but not like the mean girl popular. We were like in the sense of we were friends with everyone, because anyone that was sort of kicked out of their groups would come to us, and we would accept anyone, and we could go sit on middle school. There's like, you sit here, the jocks are here, the pretty girls are there, the whatever is here or there, and you kind of sat with your group, and we could go anywhere and anyone would come to us if they were kicked out. And that story came up, and it really does resonate to the work that I do now, both in the cooking and in this creative exploration and coaching and events, is that you belong. You can just be free to be you, because our approach even to the teaching is not like cookie cutter in the neurodiverse world. It's not, this is the curriculum and you are going to do this and then we're going to do that. It's, who are you? What are you good at? What do you struggle with? What is your definition of independence? What is your definition of living a good life? And then we build our whole curriculum around that. And it didn't dawn on me that was like what I was doing even as a kid for my friends, and just having fun and exploring. And then I just stopped doing that and trying to fit into what society, I think, deems is what you're supposed to do. We talked about what is success, being this rich person that then, I don't know why that always comes back to that of like, success is I need to have all this money, but almost at the sacrifice of myself. I can be slaving away and falling asleep at my desk, or just hustle, 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 never see my children. That's what I also thought I needed to do to be successful. And then I basically just lost myself in that, in just the day-to-day grind. And I did become successful, but it was to what I had to compromise so many things, and my health, my relationships, my closeness with my kids. And so I was like, this isn't success. This is like, again, who am I and who am I doing this for? And what do I want to do? And applying just how I approach my students in the cooking world of what do you want to do and what do you want to learn and what does it look like for you and how do you best learn? Now with some of the women that I've helped coach, we sit and we think of, what is your life? What do you want your life to look like? When do you want to wake up? When do you want to go to bed? How many hours a week do you want to work? Do you have kids that you want to spend time with? Do you have a partner? Do you want to travel? Do you like being with a lot of people or on your own? And starting with that and then building around that mission and helping them remember that when they start getting into that like hustle culture that we have now, where you've got to work hard and you've got to break your back. And if you don't, you're not successful. And bringing back that, as I started with before, of like the dolce far niente, like that sweetness of doing nothing, but not doing nothing because you're lazy. Because I think that often comes up of like, you're sitting around and if you're not doing, you're wasting your time, you're lazy, you're not holding up your weight, you need to be doing more, do more, do more. When instead it's like, this is the one life we have right now. And why am I wasting it trying to please someone else? What do I want my day to look like? And if that means sitting and staring at a tree for a little while, or taking a walk, or spending time with my kids instead of filling out a spreadsheet, then like that is important. And if all I'm doing is my work, then I'm like leaving out this whole entire side of who I am. And so that's what I want to continue to create. And also I love to travel. That's all. Growing up, we traveled a lot, and I love exploring new places and getting to know different cultures and how they work and how they function. And I think that's also part of what I bring into my work, is that just genuine curiosity and genuine acceptance of, it doesn't matter like where you're from, what your goals are, like you be you. We were joking about like, let your freak flag fly, although I don't love that term too much, because then it's like, no one's a freak. Like, we're not freaks. Like, you are who you are. And that's enough. And just be you.
So I'm watching the time and I'm just like, unfortunately, we have to not talk all night, even though we totally could. Yeah. I've really loved this time getting to know each of you, and I'm sure the person listening also is feeling that. So to you listening, if you want to connect with any of these women, their bios, more information about what they do, and of course links to connect with them is all in the description of the episode or the show notes. And of course mine too. Hello. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you right here next week.
If you love this podcast and you've been kicking around the idea of starting your own, you have got to come join us for Podcast Launch Prep Week, coming up February 23rd to 27th. Join me, Sarah, Jackie, and Katie from Podfox Media for 5 days of hands-on workshops, panel Q&As, and even hot seat coaching. You'll leave with a 6-month episode calendar already planned out, a launch strategy, and so much more. At Podfox, we've produced over 5,000 episodes, consulted on hundreds of globally ranked shows, and helped dozens of podcasters start at zero and climb the charts. We know what it takes to leverage a podcast for your business goals. Learn more and register now at podfoxmedia.com.